that the library was not for colors, it was for whites only. I never went back to that library, not the same building, but the county library in the little town of Troy, until July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my book, Walking with the Wind. By this time, I'm in the Congress. And that evening, during the program and the book signing, hundreds of blacks and white citizens showed up. They gave me a library card. And I have it in a drawer at my house on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So when I finished high school in May of 1957 at the age of 17, I wanted to attend Troy University, only 10 miles from my home. I wrote to the school, I got an application, filled it out, got my high school transcript, sent it in. I never heard a word from the school. So I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, didn't tell my father, any of my sisters or brothers, any of my teachers. I just wrote a letter to Dr. King. You know, Dr. King wrote me back. I told him I needed his help. He wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee. So in September 1957, I boarded a Greyhound bus, traveled the 50 miles from Troy to Montgomery to Birmingham, and Birmingham on to Nashville to school. And being there for a few weeks, I told one of my teachers that I've been in contact with Dr. King. This teacher knew Dr. King. They both had attended Morehouse College together. This young man on my staff here is a graduate of Morehouse College. Now, he grew up in Boston, but he came south and went to school. And so Dr. King and this teacher, they knew each other. So he told the teacher that I was in Nashville. So Dr. King got back in touch and suggested when I was home to come and see him. So on a Saturday morning, 1958, by this time I'm 18 years old, boarded a bus, went to Montgomery, and a young man by the name of Fred Gray, who was a lawyer. He was a lawyer for Rosa Parks, been a lawyer for Martin Luther King Jr., became our lawyer during the Freedom Rides in 1961 and during the March from Selma in 1965, met me and drove me to the First Baptist Church, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who was a colleague of Dr. King. If you can see this photograph, you see Reverend Abernathy walking with his wife and Dr. King and Mrs. King, and ushered me into the office of the church. And I saw Dr. King and Reverend Ralph Abernathy standing behind a desk. I was so scared, I didn't know what to say or what to do. And Dr. King spoke up and said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" And I said, "Dr. King, I'm John Robert Lewis." I gave my whole name. And that was the beginning of my relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. And from that day on, I made up my mind that I would become part of the Civil Rights Movement and do whatever I could to help. So he told me, if you try to go to Troy State, my family could lose their home, they could lose the farm, our home could be bombed or burned, but they would support me. And I went back and had a discussion with my parents, and they were very afraid. And so I continued to study in Nashville. It was in Nashville that a group of students, young people, high school students, college students, black, white, Latino, Asian American, would meet together. And we start studying the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. And so you take a table like this table, and we turn it into, let's say, a table in a restaurant. Maybe turn it into a lunch counter. And we would have what we call role playing, social drama. And be sitting there, and maybe some people pretend that they were opposing us. And this is what is actually happening.